Okay, so there are a couple things I need you to have out for today's lesson. The first thing I'd like for you to have out is a pencil. The second thing I'd like for you to have out are the notes that are going to correlate with this presentation. Once you have those two things in front of you, we're going to go ahead and proceed. Today's lesson is going to be about the three branches of government. The three branches consist of the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. As we go through this presentation today, you will have to complete your notes with each slide. Please feel free to pause this presentation at any time. That way you have enough time to write down the correct answer and response. You'll also have a series of questions that you're going to have to answer on Edpuzzle. In order to proceed to the next part of the video, you'll have to answer it correctly, and this will be a grade that I'm putting in the grade book. So please take your time and please make sure that you're reviewing your answers before you submit it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here then. As I was saying, our legislative branch is going to be our very first branch that we're going to talk about and discuss. The second branch we're going to cover is the executive branch, and the third branch is the judicial branch. So these are the three that we're really going to have to become familiar with. And this is really what governs our whole American government. This is what we call the separation of powers, and this is what's going to allow us to have a checks and balance system. Now, the Constitution is going to be written in 1787, and this is really just a framework or a guide for the American system of government. We still use our Constitution today, even though it was written so many years ago as our nation was just becoming one of its own. So, today we're going to discuss that a little bit further. Our Constitution is divided into three branches of government, as I mentioned before. The first one we're going to talk about and cover is the legislative branch. All right, so when we talk about the legislative branch, this is going to be the branch that really is responsible for making and writing laws. Please make sure you take a look at your notes and write down the correct response and the correct blanks at this time. The legislative branch is responsible for making and writing the laws. They are the ones who are going to determine what kind of laws we have as American citizens. So it's quite an important job to be a part of the legislative branch. Now, in the legislative branch, we have something called Congress. Congress is going to be the body that really is the one that comes together to write these laws and make these laws. Congress is the group of people that's going to make up that branch. Now, this is where things can get a little trickier. Congress is made up of two sections. Okay, so there's kind of splits off into two different branches if you think of it that way. Now, when new laws are proposed, they have to be ratified by both sections of Congress before they are passed. And ratified is just another word for approved. So both of these different branches of Congress have to come together and agree and approve any kind of law before it's passed. So that's something that's really important and something you want to kind of keep in mind. The House of Representatives is going to be the first section that makes up Congress, and then the second section is going to be called the Senate. Now, you can also think of it as the House of Representatives as the lower section and the Senate as the upper section. And there's a couple different guidelines to be in each. Now, the main duties of the legislative branch is going to be to pass legislation and laws. They can also declare war. They can regulate trade, regulate money. They can impeach federal officials, such as the president. And they can even override presidential vetoes, which is kind of a big deal. And this is something that we'll come back to later. Now, there are job requirements here. In order to become a senator, they have to first make sure that they are a resident of the state that they're elected by, and they must be a U.S. citizen. A senator is elected for a 6-year term. So if they are elected, then they will have to serve that 6-year term and hold that position. So a couple of the guidelines are they have to be a resident of the state. Every state is going to send a senator to be a part of this branch. And then they have to be a U.S. citizen. Now, for the executive branch, this is one that's pretty popular here. This is the one that is well known for the presidency. The executive branch is responsible for making sure that everyone follows the laws created by the legislative branch. So they're kind of like the CEO of the government. They're making sure that all parts of the government are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they're running smoothly. the president, the vice president, and the members of the president's cabinet and the heads of all federal agencies. These are going to be the groups that really make up our executive branch. Okay, these are the people that are going to make up that executive branch. Now, we need to update this picture a little bit, but President Obama was our last serving president. And now we know that we currently have President Trump. Now, at the time of President Obama, we had Joe Biden. Now, the main duties of the executive branch. Typically, they're known to enforce the laws passed by Congress. They're going to nominate judges. They appoint government officials. They make treaties with foreign nations. They extend and take back diplomatic relations with foreign nations. They can also propose a federal budget, which is kind of big, and that's something that's going into dispute right now. They can recommend laws to Congress, veto legislation or other laws, approve legislation passed by Congress. They can act as the supreme commander of all the branches of the U.S. military, and they can authorize the use of U.S. military for up to 60 days without approval of Congress. So they are responsible for quite a bit here. Make sure that you jot down and fill in your appropriate blanks on your notes, please. Now, there are job requirements, just like with anything else. A president is elected for a 4-year term. Now, we know that a president can only be elected twice, okay? That's the maximum time. Now, they must be a natural-born citizen, so that means they have to be born here in the United States in order to serve, and they must have lived in the United States for the previous 9 years, okay? Now, we have the third branch, and that's the judicial branch. In the judicial branch, we're going to have two main functions. The first is to interpret the laws created by the legislative branch and enforced by the executive branch, and the second is to preside over appeals from the lower courts. Now, when we say interpret, what we mean by that is that the judges are the ones who are going to understand the laws, and they are the ones who are going to determine the outcomes of these laws. If something is allowed or if something isn't allowed, they're the ones who do that. Now, when they're talking about presiding over appeals from lower courts, the Supreme Court is the most highly recognized court in our entire nation. Below that, we have state courts. We also have city courts and local courts. So that's what they're kind of residing over. The judicial branch is made up by the various courts of law. We know that the most powerful court is going to be the Supreme Court, and that's what we just kind of discussed. The Supreme Court is the most powerful court in the United States. In most courts, there's just going to be one judge and then a group of people known as the jury, and that's going to be kind of the way that they decide a court case. However, in the U.S. Supreme Court, there's no jury. Instead, it's going to be a group of 9 judges known as justices, and those are the people that are going to decide the results of the case. The head judge in the Supreme Court is going to be known as the Chief Justice. So that's the head judge of that group of the Supreme Court. We call them the Chief Justice. Some of the duties for the judicial branch, they have quite a few as well, just like the executive branch. They have to obviously interpret the law. They have to exercise the power of judicial review. But basically, this just means that they determine that if the laws, treaties, or other actions taken by the other 2 branches are allowable. So they're going to interpret the Constitution there as well. They hear appeals from lower courts. They preside over original court cases that involves a state versus a state or a branch of government versus a branch of government. But they also preside over trials of presidential impeachment. And impeachment is just a nice way of saying being fired. So if ever we're trying to impeach a president, or if ever legislation decides that they want to go through and impeach our president, the judicial branch and the Supreme Court would be the ones that would finally give the result of that. And there you have it. That is going to be our brief lesson on the 3 branches of government. Go ahead and you can put these notes away. You put your pencil away, and I'd like for you to silent read until everyone is finished here.